Hello everyone, my name is Tyler White, and for this class I've decided to read Lock and Key Volume 1, Welcome to Lovecraft by Joe Hill. This comic was illustrated by Gabriel Rodriguez, and this particular issue was released in February 2008 by IDW Publishing, and it's 168 pages long. The story follows the Locke family after their father is murdered. They move to an estate called the Key House in Lovecraft, Massachusetts. One of the men who murdered the Locke family's father, named Sam, is in juvie and can communicate with spirits in water. He gets a pair of scissors from a spirit and breaks out to hunt down the Locke family so he can get something called the Anywhere Key, which will allow him to transport anywhere in time. Sam makes his way to the Key House after breaking out. Bode, the youngest of the Locke family, communicates with the spirit in a well of the house, who's also Sam's master. Bode also finds something called the Ghost Door, which allows his spirit to separate from his physical body and float around, spying on other members of the Locke family without them knowing. At the end of the story, Sam is murdered by the Locke family, and the spirit breaks free from the well. This is a genuine graphic novel. There is no compilation component to it, and everything flows throughout the 6 volumes of the series to make one cohesive story. The acts were a bit difficult to follow and decipher because the narrative changes so much. Unlike many other comics such as John Oman that we read earlier this month, Lock and Key switched up the narrators throughout the story. From what I could pick up on, Act 1 begins on page 6 as Sam Lesser gets ready to murder the father of the Locke family. It ends on page 21 once the remainder of the Locke family moves to their new home in Lovecraft, Massachusetts. Act 2 starts on page 22 when the family is at the Lock and Key House and ends on page 115. On this page, the youngest child, Bode, is forced to give up the Anywhere Key so he can save his family. Finally, Act 3 starts on page 116 when Sam Lesser arrives at the Locke's home and assaults Kinsey. This act is concluded after Sam is murdered by the Locke family. Bode finds another key while fishing, which has no context to it. What that key can do is never revealed and will most likely be talked about later in the series. This graphic novel is broken up into several chapters, and each one a different character narrates. The narrative therefore switches up and each character has different goals. Bode's is to help the spirit in the well. Tyler, the oldest brother's goal is to keep busy so he can suppress his memories. The mother's is to give her children a new life. Kinsey, the sister's goal is to fit in while at her new school, and Sam's is to get the Anywhere Key. No one in the series necessarily owns the story since the dynamic is so much different than a typical graphic novel. The conflict in Act 2 does support the goal of the family trying to begin anew, since Sam escapes from prison and attacks them. Since the narrative changes so much and different characters tell their sides of the story, it can become unclear when the act breaks and beginning, middle, and end are. The resolution is only satisfactory for Sam because he ends up getting murdered. The fates of everyone else are still very much up in the air, which leaves more to be desired for the later issues of the comic. The resolution is still satisfactory, however, since Bode finds a new key while fishing. This opens up the door for many possibilities in the later issues. The only character with noticeable change in this story is Kinsey. Everyone else stays rooted in their old ways throughout the entirety of the comic, even after the traumatizing events. Kinsey, however, sees the trauma as an opportunity to start over. She cuts off her dreadlocks in an attempt to blend in with others so she doesn't get questioned for what she's been through. She used to want to stand out to everyone, but realized this isn't something she desires anymore. The murder of her father causes her to become a shell of her former self, and she even declines to make new friends throughout the comic. The transitions in this story are effective and help the audience to know where they are at all times. One of the most effective transitions is on page 94 into page 95. Sam is looking at a photo of the house in Lovecraft and sees a woman in the window, who ends up being the spirit in the well. After he looks at the photo, it brings the audience back to the office he's at, which is smooth and feels natural. The transitions in the corners also tell us where we are effectively, such as this example where the comic heads to Lovecraft, Massachusetts. 5 of 6 McLeod's transitions are shown in this comic. The only one missing is non-sequential. There's always a logical flow between the panels, and I always knew it was happening. The pages of mini-comic is not used in Lock and Key. However, the directional flow is used well. I feel that I was pulled through the story and didn't have to go back to reread panels. I would recommend this to my friends and my classmates. There were several times this month where I felt that some of the comics had too much on the pages and were difficult to follow, such as John Oman, but this comic did not have that dynamic. The content was very graphic and not safe for work, but it did read like a children's book. It was easy to follow, had an interesting dynamic to it, and I was very satisfied with my choice in reading. A fun fact about this book is that Joe Hill is Stephen King's son. The way the comic is written, the content and the characters are very reflective of his father's writing. It's also going to be getting a Netflix adaptation in the near future. Overall, I would highly recommend this comic if you're looking for something creepy, interesting, and that has a dark sense of humor. There are also 5 more volumes to the series, which I plan on checking into. Joe Hill is certainly Stephen King's protege, and I look forward to being able to read more of his works after Stephen King decides to retire. Lock and Key Volume 1 had elements such as its dynamic narrative, character development, incredible illustrations, and overall writing that made it unique. I learned quite a bit about comics from this class and analyzed this comic specifically more than I ever would have anticipated. I found a new appreciation for the comic book and graphic novel realm, and I'm excited to look more into the series as a whole.